Well, Election Day may be over, but the ballot counting continues with Joe Biden tentatively ahead in enough states to win the presidency. And as expected, the president and his allies are falsely declaring victory, lying to discredit the results, and trying to stop the count altogether. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. We're taping this at 5, so we can't say what will happen as states continue counting ballots, and they should all be counted. But as we're taping this, the president's path to victory is narrowing. Wisconsin and Michigan have both for Biden. And as New York Times election analyst Nate Cohn noted, Biden now leads in states worth 270 electoral votes, the number needed to win. Or as Trump put it in his unhinged middle-of-the-night complaint fest,
"This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. We have won Georgia. We're up by 2.5% or 117,000 votes with only 7% left. They're never going to catch us. They can't catch us. Likewise, we've clearly won North Carolina, where we're up 1.4% or 77,000 votes with only approximately 5% left. They can't catch us."
All right, first of all, yeah, they can catch you since you lumber like a retired Frankenstein looking for a golf ball in a sand trap. Second, no, you haven't won those states. You might win some of them once the counting is done, or you might lose them, but the counting isn't done. For example, I don't know what's going to happen in Georgia, but as we're taping this, there are more votes to count in Democratic areas, and that godforsaken New York Times needle has it tilting toward Biden. Spent all night staring at that thing, and every time it moved, it was like hearing a twig snap in a horror movie. I feel like that needle's a murderer's ice pick that I'm just trying to keep away from my eye. It's a big deal that Trump and Biden are even neck and neck in Georgia, and Trump knows that because in the final days of the campaign, he was wondering that he even had to campaign there at all.
"I shouldn't even be here. They say I have Georgia made."
Wow, what a shock you're underperforming there. "I shouldn't even be in this backwater state. You swamp people. When my campaign manager told me we were going to Georgia, I said, Georgia, with those redneck yokels, don't those people eat rocks and drink gasoline? Anyway, vote for me if you can figure out how to sign your name on the ballot, you freaks." In fact, as we speak, Trump's campaign is asking for a recount of Wisconsin and spent all night fighting with Fox News to withdraw their call for Biden in Arizona. And you know Trump's in bad shape when he's fighting with Fox News, an entire network dedicated to repeating everything he says. That's like the Kardashians fighting with E, I'm told. So in those states, Trump wants to keep counting, but in states where early returns had him up, like Pennsylvania, he's trying to stop ballots from being counted and suggested he wanted the Supreme Court to help him steal it.
"Well, just stop."
You can't just go to the Supreme Court and tell them to stop counting. That's not a thing. He talks about it like he's just going to walk down the street and knock on their door. "Hello, is Brett there? We're drinking beers with Tobin and Squee." This is deeply dangerous authoritarian behavior and a major test for the national media. We have to resist this. Trump's logic here is obvious. It's grotesque. He wants to keep counting Trump votes, but stop counting Biden votes. If he had his way, he'd get to personally sift through every ballot and cross out Biden's name. So as of this taping, they're still counting ballots. We're still awaiting results. But as we said, the path for Biden looks much better than the path for Trump, which is why Trump and his allies on Fox are going all out to falsely declare victory and discredit the results. But first, let's retrace what happened last night and how we got here. If you were a Democrat or a sane person hoping for an early landslide, as we all know, that did not happen. In fact, Democrats' hopes for an obvious, overwhelming result early in the night were quickly dashed in the state where Democrats' hopes are always dashed, the state that has toyed with and tormented Democrats for years, the low-key of swing states, Florida. The state ping-ponged back and forth for a while until it eventually became clear it would not go Biden's way.
Welcome to the roller coaster. Florida. If you're looking at Florida right now, it's a roller coaster. Welcome back to the roller coaster. Joe Biden has pulled ahead by 7,784 votes in the state of Florida.
Trump just took the lead in Florida.
And again, this is going to be a roller coaster by 28,000 votes, right? Palm Beach turned blue. It is red at the moment. It has gone back and forth several times in just the last 15 or 20 minutes. Let's take a look at Florida as we go through it. Again, this one is always a roller coaster.
Stop calling it a roller coaster. If you're going to be on TV for 14 hours, learn like a second word to describe up and down. We know it's a roller coaster. Every time we look forward to it, then we experience abject terror, and we end up barfing in a trash can and say, never again. And Florida isn't one of those roller coasters at a legit theme park. It's one of those weird traveling carnivals where none of the rides have safety bars and the petting zoo animals are just two donkeys and a dog. Don't touch the dog. Why is it that every election starts with Democrats getting hopeful about Florida and then getting burned? It's the political equivalent of that kid from the Twilight Zone. We're begging him not to send us to the cornfield, and then he smiles for a second, and we breathe a sigh of relief, and then he points to us sends us to the goddamn cornfield. And then we're wandering around the cornfield saying, Nate Silver said this wouldn't happen. And then Nate Silver says, no, I said this probably wouldn't happen. And then we scream, not now, Nate, I'm corn. We were told Biden had a 90% chance of winning, that the polling had been consistent for an entire year, that he was going to win by like 8 points. The early returns felt like a put-on, like some sort of elaborate joke.
Election Night in America, brought to you by Borat, subsequent movie film.
Damn it! He did it again. He's so good. John King was Sacha Baron Cohen the whole time, wasn't he? I should have guessed when he said Democrats were underperforming in the crucial Wisconsin county of Wah-Wah-Wee-Wah! Suffice it to say, election night was not fun. After one state, I was already deep into the whiskey and my stomach felt like Chernobyl. Who could possibly enjoy this?
This is why elections are fun.
Oh, right. People who are completely unaffected and lean over right before putting you under and saying, this is why brain surgery is fun. Oh, whoa! I did not see that on the scan. Another thing to remember is that these anxiety-filled election nights are a completely unnecessary product of two things, cable TV and the Electoral College. If we just had a national popular vote, like a sane country, we wouldn't have to come up with all this complicated math to fend off unpopular fascist demagogues. And we wouldn't have to learn the names of all 254 counties in Texas where somehow there's always more Trump votes left to come in. As you can see here, Biden doing well in Stonefield County, but over here in Dinkington County, we're expecting about 6 million more Trump votes. So keep an eye on that. And at some point, even the cable shows that thrive on this contrived drama ran out of stuff to say, leading to moments like this.
You see a lot of red, but you see a lot of blue as well.
Oh, thanks, Wolf. Are you a news analyst or a tour guide at the Guggenheim? There's a lot of red and also a lot of blue, and over there is one neon light on a wall. So last night did not start well for Democrats, but we should have expected that. We were told for weeks that's what would happen, that because of mail ballots, there would be a red to blue shift, that Republicans would look good early, and then Democrats would gain overnight. And yet, we couldn't heed our own advice. It's like walking into a casino, telling yourself you're going to play one game of craps, and then an hour later, you're trying to sell your watch to a parking valet for 10 more chips. This exact same thing happened in 2018, when Democrats ultimately beat Republicans by a record margin and won a huge majority. Remember how that night started? Democrats lost races in Florida, and this is how everyone reacted.
When you look at what's going on here tonight, this is not a blue wave.
This is not a blue wave.
It is not a blue wave.
It's nothing like a blue wave or a tidal wave.
It's not a blue wave.
So we haven't seen the blue wave. There is not a blue wave.
Which in retrospect was wrong. It was a blue wave, with Democrats winning by a historic margin and a national repudiation of Trump and the GOP. Watching all that early punditry was like watching Jim Nantz call the game for the Jets after the first drive because they kicked a field goal. Tony, I just don't see how the Chiefs come back from this, and I'm sorry, while I was talking, the Chiefs have scored 21 points. Last night, early in the night, we all started to get that queasy feeling that it was 2016 all over again. I spent most of the night clenching so hard I have six-pack abs now. And in those moments, I will say I was very happy that we weren't doing a live show. It's like no one wants to have a panic attack, but if you're going to, you'd prefer to have it alone in your apartment instead of on the subway in rush hour. But this morning, as millions of votes actually got counted, it's starting to feel much more like 2018. For one thing, Biden is on track to win a large popular vote victory, which would be the 7th time out of the last 8 elections that the Democrat won the popular vote. And yet, in our ridiculous Rube Goldberg political system, that's just a fun piece of trivia instead of, the deciding factor. The bottom line here is we need to count every vote. And there are still mountains of mail ballots to count, which is what always happens. As we've been saying on the show for weeks, this is how it's been since the nation's founding. You think 250 years ago they stopped counting votes at 11:59 p.m. on election night? They probably didn't even use clocks. Ben Franklin just looked at a candle in a jar, guessed that it was midnight, and then went with Mr. Adams. Tom Wilkinson, everybody, one of the greats. They did you dirty in Michael Clayton, T. Also, just to be clear, I know nothing about colonial times. I'm just assuming they didn't use clocks, so don't correct me. This is a closer look. It's not school. Anyway, the people claiming now that counting votes the morning after an election is somehow a scandal are just bad faith, soulless ghouls. They all claim to be traditionalists or originalists, or whatever ridiculous euphemisms they want to use for being anti-democratic reactionaries. When the Constitution was written, it took weeks to count all the ballots. That's why the Electoral College meets in December, and the inauguration was originally in March. Hell, it probably took weeks just to fill out the ballot because you had to use a quill and inkwell. On the other hand, the calligraphy was beautiful. Again, I know nothing about colonial times except what I learned from John Adams, which holds up. Highly recommend. If you want to call yourself a traditionalist or originalist or whatever the hell Republicans call themselves, then you have to own that. But when the rubber hits the road, they all abandon their supposed originalism and scream about how every vote needs to be counted instantaneously. Trump did this for weeks, including just this weekend.
I think it's a terrible thing when people or states are allowed to tabulate ballots for a long period of time after the election is over. And I think it's terrible when we can't know the results of an election the night of the election in a modern
tell that someone is in their 70s is when they say something like a modern day age of computer. You don't have to say that. We all use computers. They're everywhere. They have been for decades. That's like saying, we should know the outcome on election night. After all, it is the age of the automobile. What do commuters have to do with anything? They're mail-in ballots. We're not voting online. This is a presidential election, not a BuzzFeed quiz. You don't send in your ballot and then get a letter in the mail that says, congratulations, you're a Samantha. This argument is bewildering in its stupidity and insanity, and we can't forget that. It's important to remember. They're literally just counting ballots. That's it. Ballots didn't magically appear. Trump has his way of making very normal, everyday things sound like nefarious conspiracies until you take 3 seconds to think about it. You just have to take the psychotic stuff he says and sub in normal human details to see how crazy they are. Take this tweet, which, by the way, was censored by Twitter because it's a deranged lie.
He writes, last night, I was leading, often solidly, in many key states. In almost all instances, Democrat run and controlled. Then, one by one, they started to magically disappear as surprise ballot dumps were counted. Very strange, and the pollsters got it completely and historically wrong.
They're not surprise ballot dumps, Algernon. They were always there. They're just getting counted now. Trump's like a guy who loses at poker night, whining, after the first hand, I was leading, often solidly. In many key categories, then one by one, my chips started to magically disappear as I went all in on a jack high, and a surprise pair of fives was counted. Very strange. Honestly, I'm at a loss at how to explain this any more succinctly to these people. I mean, what else can you say? They're counting ballots. That's it. It's so straightforward. This is like trying to teach an infant how to say their first word. At some point, all you can do is just, here, can I make it for you? But Trump and Fox News have been priming their audience with these lies for weeks. And now the moment is here, and they're taking the outrageous and unprecedented step of falsely declaring victory before all the votes are counted and insisting that any votes that come in for their opponent are somehow fraudulent. It's an authoritarian movement intent on detonating our democracy and turning it into autocracy with a healthy sprinkling of psychosis. I mean, listen to this explanation from the President of the United States last night as to why he falsely thinks normal, routine ballot counting is somehow rigged against him.
We were getting ready for a big celebration. We were winning everything, and all of a sudden it was just called off. We won states, and all of a sudden, I said, what happened to the election? It's off. And we have all these announcers saying, what happened? And then they said, oh.
Why does Trump always sound like he's describing a dream to a therapist? We were getting ready, for like a big celebration, and then all of a sudden it was called off. And I was naked in a room full of Easter bunnies, so I don't know. Seriously, it's incoherent. It's insane. And I know we say that a lot, but especially on this day of all days, we can't lose sight of that. This is all just bewildering in its insanity. Like, let's go back to this.
I said, what happened to the election? It's off. And we have all these announcers saying, what happened? And then they said, oh.
What are you saying? I hear individual words that I recognize, but the sentence structure is gibberish. You sound like me trying to give directions in Times Square to a French tourist. Où est la boutique de M&M's? Descends, 7e Avenue. Si tu vois crevette de Bubba Gump, tu es gone too far. And sure enough, Fox News picked up on Trump's line of bull. As soon as he ended his speech, moments after they cut away from Trump, ex-Bush hack Dana Perino, who served as press secretary during one of the most disastrous and catastrophic stretches in recent American history before, the next Republican president, had this to say about Trump's speech.
Dana, but he was also saying we don't want them to find votes in Pittsburgh or any other part of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that all of a sudden you're going to find 100,000 votes that would just happen to be in some trash can behind. I think that's what he was talking about.
You ghouls love your evidence-free musings, don't you? That doesn't belong in the news. That belongs in a penny saver column called Dana's Digressions. There's literally no proof for what you're saying. These people are so insane they think election officials are finding ballots the way George Costanza found that eclair. It's a good ballot, Jerry! It was above the rim! And then this morning, Fox News went to work trying to sustain the deranged conspiracy theory that just counting votes mean magically finding votes because they can't do basic math.
This thing is to the wire. It'll be Biden who has to come back to try to grab it.
The president is up nearly statistically. Go back and tell me that thing is still really in play. How are they going to go get 700,000 additional votes? I just don't think it's going to happen.
One of the things that would be a tragedy in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia was the birthplace of liberty. And if a lot of these votes, sort of suddenly get found and they get counted days after the election, it would be a real shame if Philadelphia became the place where liberty also died.
Counting votes is not finding votes. They're not scanning the beach with a metal detector. This isn't a scavenger hunt. Oh, look, I found a ballot, a bird's nest, and a toy car. Now all we need is an autographed headshot of Steve Gutenberg, and we won the election. Again, they are all valid ballots that are just getting counted the way we always count ballots days or weeks after an election. This always happens. And people should know that. Mike Huckabee, since the last time you ran for something in 2016, you came in 9th in the Iowa caucuses. You did worse than John Kasich, who I'm pretty sure sells reverse mortgages now. Carly Fiorina, who is so unpopular, she literally disappeared at a campaign event. One of our favorites. I hope she's okay. It's been 4 years. We probably should have checked. And in case you're confused at all by that extremely dumb math you just heard, here's an actual smart person explaining early this morning why Pennsylvania was definitely not in Trump's column yet.
The big picture in Pennsylvania, we think there are upward of 2 million ballots that have not yet been counted and that are not a part of this tally. Donald Trump's lead right now in what has been tabulated is sitting at a little bit less than 700,000. Again, nearly 2 million to come, and they are disproportionately Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Montgomery County, Democratic areas.
God bless Steve Kornacki. I don't think he was off camera once last night. They even had a little Kornacki minicam in the corner of the screen when someone else was talking like he was a panda at the National Zoo. Kornacki is the new permanent picture-in-picture. When you're watching Thursday Night Football this week, he'll be in the corner counting votes in Mecklenburg County. And yet Trump and Fox News have spent months priming their audiences for this blatant attempt to steal the election and call a Biden victory fraudulent. We knew it was going to happen, and now it's here. Fox News kept putting liars on their air like a supposed GOP pollster who falsely claimed non-existent voter fraud was just baked into the system in Pennsylvania, and Fox's supposed news anchors, not just their opinion hosts, actually took him seriously.
The way I look at Pennsylvania is, unfortunately, I think he's got to win by 4 or 5 to overtake the voter fraud that will happen there. It's very systematic in Pennsylvania. I think it's achievable to get to 4 or 5, but I think that's the kind of margin he needs to have in Pennsylvania to survive.
But you're not predicting that. You're basically saying that he will win, but they'll steal it? Is that what you're predicting?
I'm saying he better win by 4 or 5% to make sure he actually gets the victory there. I think that's the margin he'd need to avoid what they will systematically do.
It's anticipatory to say that there's going to be cheating when we haven't seen it happen yet. Why are you so confident of that?
Philadelphia area.
First of all, I didn't know Colonel Sanders had a son. We're projecting a lead of 11 herbs and spices for the president on election night. If you don't believe me, just ask my droopy bow tie. Second, no, there is no history of this blatant lie you're repeating on national cable TV. And why are Fox's supposed news anchors taking this guy seriously? Is it possible they're not actually news anchors, but party hacks hired to do Trump's bidding? Or to put it in Trump speak, if you turn on Fox News, you have all these professional liars
saying what happened, and then they said, oh.
In fact, the Republicans are the ones responsible for the delays in ballot counting they're now complaining about. We could have started counting all these early mail ballots in states like Michigan and Pennsylvania before Election Day, but Republicans refused.
You may be thinking, why are we still waiting to hear from Michigan, and why are they still counting our ballots? Well, for about 18 months, the election clerks throughout the state of Michigan and I called on our state legislature to update our laws to provide time for pre-processing of ballots that were on par with many other states, like our neighbors in Ohio, who were able to count the vast majority of their ballots yesterday. Now, our state legislature chose not to make that change to our laws.
Yeah, they're the ones who said no to counting mail ballots before Election Day, and now they're the ones claiming a delay in counting mail ballots is somehow suspicious. That's the con they're running. It reminds me of that classic Supreme Court case, he who smelt it, be he who dealt it. It will take time to fully process the results of this election, and that's normal and routine, and that's how it should work. Every ballot must be counted, and we can't let Trump cheat or discredit those ballots. Moreover, Biden appears to have won a sizable popular vote victory over Trump, who's running behind many down-ballot Republicans. Will the Democrats have some soul-searching to do? Sure. But was Trump repudiated last night? We're still awaiting final results, but it's very much looking like that's what happened. If Trump had any self-awareness at all, he'd look at the state he's left the country in and say,
I shouldn't even be here.
This has been a closer look. God's Love We Deliver cooks and brings over 2 million meals a year to men, women, and children living with HIV, AIDS, cancer, and other serious illnesses, and they need your help now more than ever. If you're watching this online, you can hit the donate button. Stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask. We love you.